I haven't moved the car in 41 days. The odometer still reads 84,302 miles. It hasn't ticked over a single digit since the Tuesday the world ended. I live in the driver's seat now. My universe is defined by the gray fabric of the roofliner, the clutter of empty water bottles in the passenger footwell, and the reinforced glass that separates me from them. Outside, the wind howls off the Atlantic, shaking the suspension cables of the St. Jude Causeway. It's a 6-mile stretch of concrete and steel, suspended 200 feet above the water. An engineering marvel designed to carry commuters from the mainland to the island city. Now, it's just an open-air cemetery, a parking lot for the damned. I can see the car in front of me perfectly, a silver SUV. There's a sticker on the back window, a stick-figure family. Dad, Mom, 2 kids, and a dog. The back windshield is shattered now. I try not to look at what's draped over the back seat headrest. I try to focus on the horizon, but there is no horizon anymore. Just the mist. That thick, copper-smelling vapor that rolled in off the sea and swallowed everything. Sometimes when the wind dies down, I can hear the metal of the bridge groaning under the weight of thousands of stationary vehicles. And under that, I hear the wet, slapping sound of naked feet on asphalt. They're still out there, walking the lanes, checking the doors, waiting for someone to make a mistake.
The Tuesday grind. It started with the traffic. Just traffic. That mundane, soul-crushing blockage that everyone hates, but everyone accepts as the price of doing business. It was 8:15 a.m. I was listening to a podcast about Roman history, something about the collapse of the aqueducts. I remember thinking it was interesting, intellectually stimulating. I didn't know I was listening to a eulogy for civilization. I was in the middle lane, northbound. To my left was a blue sedan, driven by an older woman who looked like she was singing along to the radio. To my right, a sleek black luxury car, expensive, German engineering. The guy inside was on a headset, gesturing wildly. Probably closing a deal, probably yelling at an assistant. I wonder if he's still yelling now. We hit the brake lights about 2 miles onto the bridge. It wasn't unusual. The causeway often backed up during rush hour. I sighed, put the car in park, and reached for my travel mug. The coffee was lukewarm, that specific gas station roast that tastes like burnt hazelnuts. I checked my phone. No signal. That was the first thing. Usually the reception on the bridge is spotty, but this was dead. No service. I didn't think much of it. I fiddled with the radio, trying to find a traffic report. Static. Just white noise. Not the crackle of a weak signal, but a heavy, oppressive wall of sound, like the airwaves were being smothered. Then came the smell. It came through the vents before I saw anything. It smelled like ozone, like the air after a lightning strike, mixed with something else, something metallic and sour, like old pennies and spoiled milk. I hit the button to recirculate the air, wrinkling my nose. I looked around. The woman in the blue sedan had stopped singing. She was looking at her vents too. The guy in the expensive car had stopped shouting. He was tapping his headset, looking confused. And then the sun went out. It didn't set. It was swallowed. A shadow fell over the bridge, racing toward us from the south at impossible speed. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw people behind me stepping out of their cars, pointing. I looked forward. It wasn't a cloud. It was a wall of fog. But fog is soft. Fog is diffuse. This was dense, heavy, churning like a physical thing. It was gray, shot through with veins of charcoal and strange, bioluminescent violet flashes. It hit the southern pylons of the bridge first. I watched the massive concrete supports disappear into the whiteness. It hit us seconds later. It didn't slam into us like wind. It flowed over us like water. The light died instantly. 8:20 a.m. became midnight in a heartbeat. My headlights flickered on automatically, but the beams just reflected back off the mist, creating a blinding wall of glare. The engine sputtered. It wasn't a mechanical failure sound. It was an electrical death. The dashboard lights flared, bright, searing red, and then died. The radio static cut to absolute silence. The engine didn't cough, it just ceased to exist. Momentum carried me a few inches forward, and then stillness. Silence. Absolute silence. No engines. No humming tires. Just the sound of the ocean, suddenly very loud, crashing against the pylons far below. I sat there for a full minute, hands gripping the wheel. My brain was trying to reboot, trying to find a logical file for instant massive power failure and instant weather event. Solar flare? EMP? Terrorist attack? I tried the key. Nothing. Not even the click of the starter solenoid. I tried my phone again. Dead screen. It wasn't just no signal. The battery was fried. I did what everyone else did. I opened the door. The air outside was thick, humid, but cold. It clung to my skin immediately, leaving a greasy film. That copper smell was overpowering now, tasting like blood in the back of my throat. "Hey!" I jumped. It was the guy in the luxury car. He was standing on the asphalt, looking at his phone, shaking it. He looked at me, eyes wide, panic just starting to fringe the edges of his irritation. "Is your car dead?" he asked. His voice sounded muffled, deadened by the fog. The acoustics were all wrong. "Yeah, everything's dead." "I have a meeting," he said, staring at his phone as if sheer willpower could recharge it. "I have a conference call in 10 minutes. What is this?" People were emerging from their vehicles all around us, a sea of confused faces in the gloom. The woman from the blue sedan was hugging a cardigan around herself. A truck driver a few cars ahead had climbed up onto the roof of his cab, trying to see over the mist. "Can anyone get a signal?" someone shouted from the back. "My car won't start. Is it a blackout?" I walked to the edge of the bridge railing. The barrier is concrete, about waist high, with a metal rail on top. I looked over. Usually you can see the whitecaps of the water. Now I couldn't see anything past a 10-foot drop. The mist swallowed the ocean. But I could hear it. It sounded angry. "Don't touch the railing!" I turned. An older man wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit was pointing at me. "Static," he said. "Look." He pointed to where my hand was hovering near the metal. Tiny violet arcs of electricity were jumping between the rail and the mist itself. I pulled my hand back, heart hammering. "What is going on?" I asked him. "Atmospheric ionization," he muttered, looking up at the invisible sky. "Or something worse. Look at your watch." I looked at my wrist. I wear an old analog watch, a mechanical wind-up piece my grandfather gave me. It was still ticking, the second hand sweeping smoothly. 8:25, I said. "The electronics are fried," the mechanic said, "but gears still work. Whatever this is, it eats electricity." "Hello?" the businessman screamed into the gray. "Is anyone coming? We're stuck out here." That was when we heard the first scream.
It didn't come from a person. It sounded like metal tearing, a high-pitched, shrieking shear that vibrated in my teeth. It came from ahead of us, maybe 50 yards north, hidden in the fog. Then, the human screaming started. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was the wet, gurgling scream of someone whose lungs are being filled with something that shouldn't be there. "Get back in your cars!" I don't know who yelled it. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the mechanic. But the instinct hit me hard in the gut. Hide. The businessman didn't hide. He stood in the middle of the lane trying to see what was happening. "What is that?" he demanded. "Who was screaming?" I was backing up, hand finding the door handle of my Civic. "Hey man," I hissed at him. "Get inside, now!" He ignored me. He took a step forward toward the noise. Out of the fog, something emerged. It was a person, or it had been. It was wearing a yellow raincoat, maybe a construction worker, but it was walking wrong. Its knees were bending backward, not broken, just articulated in reverse. It moved with a lurching, snapping gait. Snap, drag, snap, drag. The businessman froze. "Sir?" he called out. "Do you need help?" The thing in the raincoat stopped. It swiveled its head toward the businessman. It didn't turn its neck. The whole upper torso twisted with a sickening crunch. Its mouth opened. There was no jaw, just a gaping vertical split that went down to the collarbone. I didn't watch it happen. I dove into my driver's seat and slammed the door. I locked it. I jammed my body against the frame, hyperventilating. Outside, the businessman started screaming. It was a short, sharp sound that ended in a wet crunch. Then, something heavy hit the side of my car. Thump. I flinched, curling into a ball below the window line. Thump. Something was sliding down the passenger door. A smear of red appeared on the glass, bright and shocking against the gray fog. I stayed in the footwell for what felt like hours. Outside, the world was ending. I heard running footsteps. I heard people banging on windows, begging to be let in. I heard glass shattering. I heard the mechanic, the guy I'd just spoken to, yelling, stay back," followed by the clang of a tire iron. And then, nothing. I didn't open the door. I want you to understand that. I need you to understand. Someone pounded on my back window. A woman. She was screaming, "Please, he's right behind me. Open the door." I didn't move. I stared at the floor mat. I watched a speck of dried mud on the rubber. I counted the grooves in the brake pedal. I listened to her fists drumming on the glass. Thump, thump, thump. "Please." Thump, thump, thump. And then, the sound like a wet towel hitting a tile floor. And she stopped screaming. I must have passed out or gone into shock. When I lifted my head, it was pitch black outside. The only light came from the bioluminescent veins in the fog, pulsing faintly with a sick, violet rhythm. I slowly pulled myself up into the seat. My back screamed in protest. I looked out the side window. The businessman's car was empty. The door was hanging open. The leather seat was soaked. The woman in the blue sedan, she was still there. She had locked her doors. She was sitting upright, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. But her eyes were gone. Just black, empty sockets leaking that dark fluid. She wasn't moving. She was just waiting.
That was the first night I didn't sleep. I sat with the tire iron from under my seat gripped in my hand, watching the shadows move in the fog. I took inventory. That's what you do when the panic burns out and leaves you hollow. You count. I had 1 half-full travel mug of cold coffee, 2 bottles of water in the back seat, 1 sealed, 1 half empty, a bag of trail mix in the glove box, a pack of gum, a gym bag in the trunk containing a change of clothes and a towel, and a car that was essentially a 2-ton steel coffin. I tried the flashlight. Bad idea. As soon as the beam hit the window, a shape slammed against the glass. Bang! I killed the light instantly. I saw a face pressed against the glass for a split second. Pale, bloated, skin like wet dough. It didn't look angry. It looked curious, like a deep-sea fish inspecting a submersible. It slid away into the dark. I learned lesson number 1. Light is a dinner bell. I sat in the dark. The cold began to seep in. The ocean wind cut through the door seals. I grabbed the hoodie from my gym bag and put it on. I curled up in the back seat, trying to stay below the window line. The silence returned, but it wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of anticipation. The bridge was listening. I wondered about the rest of the world. Was it just the bridge? Was the city on fire? Was the mainland gone? Or was this just a freak weather event localized to the causeway? Maybe rescue was coming. Maybe the Coast Guard was already deploying boats. Maybe tomorrow morning the sun would rise, burn off the mist, and we'd all laugh about the nightmare. That was 41 days ago. The sun never rose, the mist never lifted, and nobody came.
Day 2 passed, then day 3. The panic didn't leave, but it changed. It curdled. It turned into a heavy, suffocating dread that sat in the pit of my stomach. I finished the last sip of water on the morning of the 3rd day. It was warm and tasted like plastic. I squeezed the bottle, trying to get the last drop, and the crinkle of the plastic sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I froze, waiting for them to come. They didn't. Thirst is a specific kind of madness. It's not just a physical sensation, it's a voice. It starts whispering to you after 24 hours. It tells you to drink the condensation off the windows. It tells you to open the door and lick the mist off the roof. I watched the birds die first. The seagulls that usually swarmed the bridge were grounded. They huddled on the roofs of the trucks, their feathers rotting off in clumps. I saw one peck at a puddle of the black fluid leaking from a dead man's ear. 5 minutes later, the bird was thrashing on the asphalt, its wings breaking with audible snaps. That was lesson number 2. Don't touch the fluids. By the afternoon of day 4, I knew I had to move. The thirst was making my hands shake. My tongue felt like a piece of dry felt in my mouth. I looked at the silver SUV in front of me, the one with the stick figure family. The back window was smashed. I could see the cargo area. There was a cooler, a red plastic Coleman cooler. It was sitting right there, maybe 10 feet away. 10 feet. It might as well have been 10 miles. I prepared. I taped my pant legs shut with some electrical tape I found in my toolkit. I didn't want anything crawling up my legs. I took the tire iron. I took the empty water bottle. I waited for the lull. That's what I call it. The bridge has a rhythm. The things out there, they aren't random. They have a tide. During the high tide, usually around what I assume is night, they are active, screaming, running, hunting. But in the gray hours of the morning, they slow down. They become sluggish. I watched my mirrors. Nothing moving. Just the endless rows of silent cars.
I didn't open the door. The hinge might squeak, the dome light might flicker. Even though the battery was dead, I was superstitious about it. Instead, I rolled down the window. I had a manual crank, thank God for base model cars. I turned it slowly. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. It took me 10 minutes to get it down wide enough to squeeze through.
The air hit me first. It was cold, freezing cold. And the smell. Up close, the bridge smelled like a slaughterhouse that had been left in the sun, masked by the ozone tang of the mist. I dropped to my stomach immediately. I didn't walk. I crawled. There is a whole world beneath the traffic jam. A dark, dripping tunnel made of chassis and mufflers. I crawled under my Civic. I crawled under the luxury car next to me. I saw the businessman's shoes. One expensive Italian loafer, lying on its side. The foot was still inside it, severed cleanly at the ankle. I didn't look for the rest of him. Slap, slap, slap. Footsteps, bare feet on wet pavement. I froze. I was under a large delivery truck now, squeezed between the drive shaft and the asphalt. I held my breath until my lungs burned. 2 gray feet shuffled into view about 3 yards away. They were grotesque. The toes were fused together. The skin was translucent, showing dark black veins pulsing underneath. The ankles were swollen, the bone structure distorted. It stood there for an eternity. I could hear it breathing, a wet, rattling sound, like air bubbling through fluid. It was smelling the air. It let out a low, mournful croak and then shuffled on. I waited 5 minutes after the sound of its footsteps faded before I moved again. I reached the silver SUV. The back bumper was dented. I crawled out from under the car behind it and slowly, agonizingly, raised my head to peek into the broken rear window.
I didn't look at the back seat. I focused on the cooler. I reached through the broken glass. My sleeve caught on a jagged shard. I pulled it free. Rip. The sound was soft, but in the silence it was terrible. I paused. Nothing. I grabbed the handle of the cooler and pulled. It was heavy. That was good. Heavy meant full. I dragged it over the broken glass. I couldn't lift it out. It was too awkward. I had to open it right there. I flipped the latch, opened the lid. Jackpot. I grabbed the water bottles. I grabbed the juice boxes. I shoved them into my pockets, down the front of my hoodie. I grabbed a plastic bag of grapes, now soggy and brown, and shoved that in too. Then I saw the eyes. She was still buckled in. Her skin was gray, mottled with purple bruises. Her mouth was taped shut with silver duct tape. Her hands were duct taped to the steering wheel. She was staring at me in the mirror. Her eyes were red, bloodshot, human. She was crying. She wasn't one of them. She was infected maybe, or bitten, and she had restrained herself before she could hurt her kids. She tried to speak against the tape, muffled, desperate noises. She jerked against the wheel. I flinched back, dropping a bottle of water. It rolled under the car. The noise made her thrash harder. She was begging me, or warning me. Then I heard the screech again. Something was on the roof. I didn't wait. I dropped to the ground and scrambled back under the chassis. I heard the roof of the SUV tear open like aluminum foil. I heard the woman's muffled screams turn into a wet gurgle. I heard the heavy, meaty thuds of something descending into the car. I crawled. I scraped my knees raw on the asphalt. I banged my head on a differential. I didn't care. I scrambled back to my Civic, threw the water bottles through the open window, and dove in head first. I rolled the window up so fast I almost broke the crank. I locked the door. I pulled the hoodie over my head and curled into a ball, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. I drank 2 bottles of sparkling water in 10 seconds. It burned my throat. I didn't care. I listened to the sounds from the car in front of me. The tearing, the eating. It went on for 20 minutes. Then silence returned. I survived the run, but I came back with more than just water. While I was crawling, I saw things under the other cars. I saw how the tires were melting, not burning, melting. The rubber was fusing with the asphalt. Whatever the mist is, it's corrosive.
It's breaking down the world on a molecular level. And I saw something else. I looked in my side mirror. 2 cars back, in the lane to my left, there was an ambulance. It had been silent for days, but now, in the pitch dark, I saw a light. It wasn't a flashlight. It was a faint, rhythmic pulsing. Red. Blink, blink, blink. Pause. Blink, blink, blink. Someone was covering and uncovering a dashboard LED. SOS. I stared at it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed my flashlight. I knew the rule. Light is a dinner bell, but I had to know. I cupped my hand over the lens, letting only a tiny sliver of light escape. I aimed it at the side mirror, angling it back toward the ambulance. Blink, blink, blink. I waited. The red light in the ambulance stopped. Then it flashed back, fast, excited. Blink, blink, blink. I wasn't alone. But between me and the ambulance was a gap, and in that gap, I could see the silhouette of the thing that had eaten the lady in the SUV. It was perched on top of a FedEx truck, its long, multi-jointed limbs draped over the sides like a spider waiting for a fly. I looked at the red light. I looked at the monster. I opened my notebook and wrote my first entry. Day 4. Found water. Found a friend. Found a monster. The bridge is an ecosystem, and I am at the bottom of the food chain.
We developed a language. It was slow, agonizingly slow. I didn't know Morse code, neither did she. We used a crude system of flashes. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no, rapid flashing for danger. It took us 3 hours that first night to exchange names. I would flash a letter, or what I hoped was a letter, by tracing shapes in the air with my sliver of light, or just counting. 1 flash for A, 2 for B. It was tedious. It was dangerous, but it was the only thing keeping me sane. Her name was Sarah. She was an EMT. She was alone in the back of the rig. The driver was dead. She had food. She had a gun. The days blurred. Day 5, day 6, day 7. The Watcher, that's what I named the thing on the FedEx truck, didn't move. It sat there for 72 hours straight. It was an ambush predator. I watched it through a pair of cheap plastic binoculars I'd found under the passenger seat. It looked like a bundle of wet driftwood wrapped in black wire. It had too many joints. Sometimes a limb would twitch, or its head, if that was a head, would rotate 180 degrees to scan the lanes. It knew we were here. I felt it. It was waiting for a door to open. It was waiting for the panic to override the logic. "Don't move," I whispered to the glass. "Just stay there, you ugly bastard." Sarah and I only spoke at night during the high tide, ironically. The red light of her ambulance was masked by the chaos of the other bioluminescent shapes moving in the fog. During the day, the Watcher would see the light. We learned to time it. Is the Watcher looking left? Flash, flash, no. Is it looking right? Flash, yes. We were playing red light, green light with a monster that could punch through steel.
By day 9, the silence started to change. The fog wasn't just dampening sound anymore. It was mimicking it. I was trying to sleep during the day, curled in the back seat with my hoodie over my eyes. It was hot. The greenhouse effect inside the car was stifling, but cracking a window was death. I heard a knock on the rear driver's side window. Tap, tap, tap. Gentle, rhythmic, polite. Then a voice, clear as a bell, not muffled by the glass. "Elias, honey,
I forgot my keys. My heart stopped. It was Jennifer, my wife. Jennifer, who was safe at home on the mainland. Jennifer, who was 3 hours away from the bridge. Elias, come on. It's cold out here. Open the door. It sounded exactly like her. The inflection, the slight annoyance in her tone. I have the groceries, Elias. Just open the trunk at least. I gripped the door handle. My brain knew it was impossible. My brain knew the world was broken. But my heart wanted to believe that the mist was just a fog, and I was just in the driveway, and everything was normal. I unlocked the door. Click. The sound broke the spell. Open it, the voice whispered. It wasn't Jennifer anymore. It was a guttural, wet rasp layered under her voice. Open it! I screamed. I slammed the lock back down. I threw myself to the other side of the car, scrambling over the center console, kicking the dashboard. The face at the window smiled. It didn't have lips, just exposed gums and needle teeth. It fogged the glass with its breath, traced a line with a long gray finger, and then melted back into the mist. That was lesson number 3. The mist lies. Day 12 brought the storm. It wasn't rain. It was a deluge of black sludge. The sky opened up around noon. The light dropped to a bruised purple. The wind hit the bridge like a physical blow. I felt my car rock on its suspension. The suspension cables of the bridge began to sing, a high, mournful vibration that rattled my teeth. I watched the FedEx truck. The watcher was shrieking, a sound like grinding metal. It hated the rain. The black sludge seemed to burn it. Steam rose from its charcoal skin. It lost its grip. With a shriek that cut through the wind, the watcher was blown off the roof of the truck. It tumbled over the side of the bridge railing, flailing into the abyss. I waited for the splash. I never heard it. But the truck was empty. The path was clear. Sarah. For the first time I saw her, just a sliver of her face. She was pale, wearing a mask pulled down around her neck. Her dark hair was matted. She held up a whiteboard. She must have had it in the rig. On it, written in shaky marker, I have an idea.
The storm raged for 6 hours. It was the perfect cover. The noise masked everything. The sludge kept the walkers and the crawlers hidden in the undercarriage. Sarah's plan was brilliant and desperate. She opened the back door of the ambulance wider. She threw something toward my car. It was a roll of gauze, weighted down with something heavy, maybe a stapler. It unspooled in the air, a white streamer against the black rain. It landed on the hood of the car behind me, short. She pulled it back, reeled it in. I didn't wait. I crawled into the back seat. I cranked the rear window down just enough to get my arm out. The black rain burned my skin, acidic, stinging like bee stings. I grabbed the gauze. I pulled. Attached to the gauze was a thicker rope, an IV tube, and attached to the IV tube was a plastic basket, a small medical waste bin. I tied the tube to the headrest of my passenger seat. We had a line, a physical connection. Sarah wasted no time. She tugged the line twice. I pulled the basket in. Inside, wrapped in biohazard bags, were 3 MREs, a bottle of sterile saline, a walkie-talkie. Elias. Her voice was real. It was tinny, distorted by the storm, but it was human. It wasn't the voice mimicking my wife. It was Sarah. I pressed the button. My throat was so dry, so unused to speaking that I choked. I'm here. I'm here, Sarah. Oh, thank God, she said.
She sounded like she was crying. "I thought you were dead. I haven't heard a sound from your car in 2 days." I was hiding. The voice, it tried to trick me. I know. It tried to sound like my dad yesterday. Don't listen to it, Elias. Never listen to it.
We spent the rest of the storm talking. We kept it short to save batteries, but we talked. She told me the bridge was blocked at both ends. She'd used the high-powered optics in the ambulance to see the north end. The military had barricaded it before they fell. Concrete walls, tanks, all silent now. "We are in a cage," she said. "A 6-mile-long cage." "What about the radio?" I asked. "Have you heard anything?" "Nothing on the emergency bands," she said. "But, Elias, there's something else. Channel 9, shortwave." "What is it?" "It's numbers," she said. "Someone is broadcasting numbers. Coordinates, maybe. It loops every hour, but it's getting louder." "I think someone has left," she whispered. "I think someone is watching the bridge." "Did you feel that?" I asked. "Yeah." Sarah's voice trembled. Something heavy just jumped onto the hood of the car between us. I grabbed my binoculars. The rain was stopping. The fog was rolling back in, thick and suffocating. I looked at the silver SUV, the one I had scavenged, the one with the dead mother. Something was standing on top of it. It wasn't the watcher. It was smaller, pale, naked. It was holding the empty water bottle I had dropped days ago. It was turning it over in its hands, sniffing it. It turned its head. It looked at the fishing line, the IV tube connecting my car to Sarah's. It reached out a hand and plucked the line. Twang. The vibration traveled through the tube, into my car, and I felt it in my teeth. "Cut the line," I yelled into the walkie. "Sarah, cut the line."
"Cut it!" I screamed into the radio. "Sarah, cut it now!" The walkie-talkie crackled. "I can't reach it! It's caught on the door handle!" The pale one yanked again. My car lurched backward a full 6 inches. The metal of the parking brake groaned in protest. I scrambled into the back seat, clawing at the knot on the headrest. It was fused tight, pulled by inhuman strength. I grabbed the tire iron. I jammed it into the loop of the tube and twisted it, trying to snap the plastic. It stretched. It wouldn't break. Outside, the creature let out a sound. Not a scream, a laugh, a wet, chittering giggle. It was playing. It had 2 fish on a line, and it was enjoying the struggle. Snap. The tension released instantly. The tube whipped back toward my car with the force of a bullwhip. The metal connector at the end smashed into my rear windshield. Crack! A spiderweb fracture blossomed on the glass. The pale one stumbled back, holding the severed end of the line. It looked at the limp tubing in its hand. Then it looked at the ambulance. It dropped the line. It got down on all 4s. Its spine protruded sharply through its skin, like a row of knuckles. "Elias," whispered Sarah over the radio. "It's coming toward me." I watched from my fractured window. The creature didn't run. It flowed. It moved over the hood of the silver SUV and onto the roof of the ambulance with the grace of oil spilling across water. I heard the thump as it landed on her roof. "Be quiet," I hissed. "Turn off the radio. Don't make a sound." "It knows I'm here," she breathed. Her voice was barely audible. "It can smell the MREs. It can smell me." It was looking for a way in. The ambulance was a fortress compared to my Civic, but everything has a weak point. The creature found the ventilation hatch. I saw it grip the plastic cover of the vent. It pulled. No leverage. It adjusted its grip,
its muscles bunched under that translucent skin, black fibers tightening. Screech! The plastic didn't just pop off. The creature tore the metal housing right out of the roof. A hole, maybe 6 inches wide, opened up. The creature lowered its face to the hole. It opened its mouth and screamed into the ambulance. "It's trying to flush me out," Sarah sobbed. "It's screaming at me." "Don't shoot," I begged, though I knew it was useless. "If you shoot everything on this bridge, we'll hear it." "It's reaching in." I saw the arm, long, gray, impossibly jointed, snake down through the vent hole. It was blindly groping the interior, fingers twitching, searching for soft meat. Sarah scrambled back. The hand brushed her boot. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots. In the open air, a gunshot is loud. Inside the acoustic trap of a bridge covered in fog, it was apocalyptic. The sound rolled out like thunder, bouncing off the water, amplifying, echoing endlessly. The muzzle flashes lit up the fog like strobe lights, brief, violent bursts of white revealing the silhouettes of thousands of cars. The creature on the roof jerked. Black fluid sprayed from the vent hole. It shrieked, a sound of genuine pain this time, and fell off the side of the ambulance. It hit the ground writhing, clutching its shoulder. Sarah had hit it. "I got it!" she yelled over the radio. "I shot it!" "Sarah," I said, my voice dead. "Listen." The bridge woke up. It started as a vibration in the floor of my car. Then the moans started, a chorus of them. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "Turn off the radio," I said. "Hide. Get under the blankets. Don't move. Don't breathe." "Elias, hide." I clicked my radio off. I dove into the footwell of the passenger seat. I buried myself under my sleeping bag and a pile of dirty clothes. I pressed my hands over my ears. Then the swarm hit. It sounded like a hailstorm if the hail was made of meat and bone. They were swarming the source of the noise. They were swarming the ambulance. I heard the metal of the rig being battered. I heard them tearing at the doors. I heard the siren briefly chirp as something smashed into the console, then die. I didn't hear Sarah scream. I don't know if that's good or bad. I just heard the frenzy of the feast, the tearing, the fighting, the wet snaps. I lay there for 6 hours. I wet myself. I didn't care. I was a statue. I was a part of the car. I was dead.
When I finally emerged, it was day 13, maybe 14. The silence had returned, but it felt heavier now, thicker. I slowly peeled the sleeping bag off my head. The air in the car was stale, smelling of my own fear and sweat. I raised my eyes to the window. They had taken everything. The silver SUV, the one with the cooler, was overturned. They had flipped a 2-ton vehicle in their frenzy. I was alone again. But this time, I had a walkie-talkie, and I had the channel Sarah had told me about. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the empty ambulance. I picked up the Motorola. I didn't try to call her. I knew better. I turned the dial to channel 9.
7, 4, north, 1, 1, 8, west, target confirmed, clearance code, Jericho, repeating, 7, 4.
It wasn't a distress beacon. It wasn't a survivor asking for help. It was a targeting computer.
I listened to the loop for an hour. I wrote the numbers down in my notebook, right next to the entry about Sarah. 74 north, 118 west.
I remembered my geography from high school. Or maybe I just remembered the GPS on my phone before it died. Those weren't random coordinates. 74 north. I was way up. The Arctic? No, 74 is New York? No. I dug around in the glove box. Maps. Old school paper maps. I found a folded map of the eastern seaboard. I traced the lines with a shaking finger. It wasn't land. It was the ocean. Deep ocean. Target confirmed. Clearance code Jericho. Payload delivery in T-minus 14 days. The voice added a new line. Payload delivery. My stomach dropped. They weren't sending rescue, they were sending a payload. I looked out at the bridge, at the miles of cars, at the monsters hiding in the fog. Going to glass it. They're going to nuke the bridge. I had 14 days. I looked at the fuel gauge. Empty. I looked at the water. 3 bottles left. I looked at the bridge ahead, blocked by a wall of rusted steel and nightmares. I couldn't stay here. The car was a coffin, the ambulance was a tomb, and in 2 weeks the sky was going to fall. I had to walk. I opened the door. The air smelled like copper and ozone. The silence was absolute. I stepped out onto the asphalt. I stood up to my full height for the first time in 2 weeks. My joints popped. I looked north, into the fog. 14 days, I said. I started walking.
Walking is different than driving. When you drive, you glide over the world. When you walk, you feel every crack in the pavement. You feel the slope of the engineering. You feel the vulnerability. I had walked maybe 2 miles. My legs were burning, atrophy from 2 weeks of sitting in a car, screaming at me with every step. My magazine and duct tape armor chafed against my skin, but I didn't dare take it off. I stuck to the center line. The gutter lanes, the far left and far right, were dangerous. That's where the drains were, and I had learned that things like to crawl up from the maintenance catwalks beneath the bridge. The silence out here was heavy. It wasn't empty silence, it was a hold-in-your-breath silence. I passed a convertible. The driver was an ash statue. That's what the mist does if it doesn't turn you into a monster. It dries you out. It sucks the moisture from your cells until you're just a sculpture of dust waiting for a strong wind to blow you apart. I didn't look at his face. I looked at his back seat. A bottle of water? A weapon? No. Just a set of golf clubs. Useless. I kept moving. My plan was simple. Reach the north end, find the military barricade Sarah had mentioned. If they were dead, maybe their equipment wasn't. Maybe there was a truck. Maybe there was a boat. Maybe there was a way off this bridge before the payload turned us all into steam. Then I saw the bus.
It was a standard yellow school bus, District 9. It had jackknifed across the road, probably in the initial panic. The back wheels were hanging precariously over the bridge railing, suspended over the drop. I stopped. I crouched behind the trunk of a Honda Civic. The bus was silent. The windows were dark, painted over on the inside with something black and opaque. I needed to cross. The bus was blocking the center lanes. I could squeeze around the front, near the dangerous gutter lane, or I could try to go through it. Going around meant exposing myself to the railing and whatever was climbing up from the ocean. Going through meant, well, entering a blind box. I chose the bus. I needed supplies. A school bus meant a first aid kit. It meant potential food in lunchboxes. I was down to 2 MREs. I couldn't afford to be picky. The smell hit me instantly. It wasn't the copper smell of the mist. It was the smell of a swamp. Humid, earthy, rotting vegetation. I clicked my flashlight on, keeping the beam low. The interior of the bus was wrong. It wasn't a vehicle anymore. It was a greenhouse. The mist had gotten inside, trapped,
and without the wind to disperse it, it had concentrated. It had evolved. The seats were covered in a gray, fuzzy mold. Vines, pulsing with that same violet bioluminescence, hung from the ceiling like streamers. And the passengers, they were still there. Small shapes, kids. They were wrapped in cocoons of the gray webbing, stuck to the seats. I put my hand over my mouth, breathing through my sleeve. I didn't want to inhale the spores. I moved down the aisle. Crunch. The floor was covered in brittle, calcified bone. I reached the driver's seat. The first aid box was mounted on the bulkhead. I popped the latch. Jackpot. I was turning to leave when I heard the sound. Hiss. It came from the ceiling. Visuals. Elias shines the light up. The vines hanging from the ceiling aren't vines. They are tentacles. Long, gelatinous strands hanging from a central mass stuck to the roof hatch. The mass opens a single yellow eye. It wasn't a plant. It was a barnacle. A massive flesh-eating barnacle that had colonized the roof of the bus. The vines twitched. They sensed the heat of my flashlight. One of them lashed out, wrapping around my forearm. It burned. Even through the duct tape and the jacket, I felt the cold burn of acid. The tentacle tightened, pulling me upward. My feet left the floor. I dropped the flashlight. It rolled down the aisle, the beam spinning crazily, illuminating the cocoons. I swung the tire iron. Whack! I hit the tentacle. It had the consistency of wet rubber. It didn't break. I was being dragged up toward the roof, toward a beak-like maw that was opening in the center of the mass. I couldn't reach my knife. My arm was pinned. The flare gun. I was still holding the first aid kit in my left hand. I dropped the box, fumbled for the flare gun. My fingers felt like sausages in the gloves. I felt the trigger. I didn't aim. I just jammed the barrel upward into the mass of jelly and teeth. Pop! Whoosh! I fell. I hit the floor hard. The tentacle went limp, dissolving into black sludge. The fire was spreading instantly. The gray mold was highly flammable. The seats caught fire. The cocoons began to twitch as they burned. I scrambled up. I grabbed the flashlight. I didn't look back. I dove out the folding doors just as the windows of the bus blew out. I lay there, gasping. The smoke from the bus was thick and black. And then I realized my mistake. Fire is light. Light is a dinner bell. And I had just lit a beacon in the middle of the bridge.
I ran. My legs screamed. My lungs burned, but I ran. I had to get away from the light. I sprinted past the burning bus, diving into the shadows of the cars ahead. I didn't stop until the glow of the fire was a dull orange haze behind me. I collapsed against the wheel of a semi-truck. I checked my armor. The duct tape on my arm was melted. The magazine underneath scorched, but my skin was intact. I drank half a bottle of water. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled some on my chin. I looked forward. I needed to see how far I had to go. The fog had thinned slightly, maybe burned off by the heat of the fire or just a shift in the wind. I saw what lay ahead. It wasn't a traffic jam. It was a wall. Cars had been lifted by immense strength and stacked on top of each other. Sedans, trucks, vans. They were crushed together, welded by the gray calcification, forming a grotesque rampart blocking the way north. And on top of the wall, they built a castle, I whispered. The infected weren't just mindless animals, or at least some of them weren't. Something was directing them. Something was building. I looked at the wall. It was impassable. But then I saw the gap. On the far right, where the bridge railing met the wall of cars, the structure had collapsed slightly. There was a hole, dark and jagged, leading into the pile. A tunnel. I had to crawl through a mountain of unstable, crushed cars, filled with who knows what, to get to the other side. I checked my watch. Day 14. 13 days to payload. I checked the flare gun. 1 flare left. I stood up. I adjusted my armor.
Into the belly of the beast, I muttered.
The wall wasn't just piled cars, it was fused. As I crawled into the gap, I realized why the structure hadn't collapsed under its own weight. The gaps between the vehicles were filled with a substance. It looked like gray concrete, but when I brushed my shoulder against it, it was soft, spongy. It was organic. The infected, the architects, were vomiting this stuff up. It was a resin, a biological mortar that hardened over time, welding the steel together. The wall was a living thing. I moved inch by inch. The tunnel was a jagged wound through the wreckage. I had to crawl through the shattered back window of a sedan, over the seats, and out through the windshield into the cargo hold of a van. Creak. Groan. The whole mountain was settling. Every time the wind hit the bridge outside, the tunnel shifted. I felt the weight of 300 cars pressing down on my spine. I wasn't the first person to come this way. Inside the van, buried 20 feet deep in the wall, I found a shoe, a child's sneaker. It wasn't worn, it was dropped. And next to it, written on marker on the metal wall of the van, quiet. They hear thoughts. Paranoia or evolution? I turned off my flashlight. I couldn't risk it. The architect mortar, glowing faintly with that violet bioluminescence, provided just enough light to see my own hands. I crawled forward, into the dark throat of the machine.
The tunnel opened up. I emerged into a cavern. It was a hollowed-out space inside the center of the wall, formed by a circle of shipping containers that had been stacked intentionally. The smell was overpowering, ammonia and copper. I crouched behind a pile of tires. I looked up. It was a nursery. The sacks were incubators. I saw a hand press against the membrane of one sack. It had 6 fingers, long, spindly gray fingers, and tending to them were the architects. There were 3 of them. They moved with a terrifying grace, silent and efficient. They weren't hunting, they were working. I held my breath. I had to cross the floor of the cavern to get to the exit tunnel on the other side. It was 30 feet of open ground, littered with debris. I waited for them to look away. One architect moved to a sack that had stopped pulsing. It ripped the membrane open. A malformed fetus, gray and lifeless, spilled out. The architect picked it up, not with sadness, but with utility. It carried the body to a hole in the floor and dropped it in. Waste disposal. I moved. I made it halfway. Then my backpack strap caught on a jagged piece of rebar sticking out of the floor. I pulled. It was stuck. I looked up. An architect was turning around. I pulled harder. Rip. The sound was soft, like tearing paper. But in the silence of the nursery, it was a shout. The architect froze. Its head, which was fused into its shoulders, necklace, swiveled. It didn't have eyes. It had a row of sensory pits along its forehead. It let out a click. Click, click, click. Echolocation.
I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I became stone. The click wave hit me. I felt it, a physical vibration in my chest. The warning on the van wall flashed in my mind. They hear thoughts. I tried to empty my mind. I tried to think of nothing. Just white noise, static, the ocean. The architect took a step toward me. It clicked again, louder, aggressive. It knew something was there, but the pile of tires was breaking up my silhouette. It took another step. It was 10 feet away. I could smell it, old earth and dry rot. Then, from the tunnel I had just come from, the entrance,
A sound echoed. Clang. Someone else was in the tunnel. Or something else. The architect whipped around, shrieking at the intrusion behind me. The other two joined it, rushing the entrance tunnel. I didn't question my luck. I unhooked my backpack strap and scrambled for the exit. I clawed my way up. The light grew brighter, the gray, overcast daylight of the outside world. I pushed the heavy piece of debris aside and dragged myself out. I was on the other side of the wall. I rolled onto the asphalt, gasping for air. The air here was fresher, colder. The wind was back. I stood up and looked around. I was in the north end. The military had fought. The road was scarred by a heavy weapons fire. There were husks of tanks, Abrams and Bradleys, burned out and gutted. But the infected bodies were gone. The road was swept clean. And ahead, maybe 2 miles away, was the end of the bridge, the Causeway toll plaza. The Citadel, I whispered. That was the blockade Sarah saw. But there was no movement, no patrol, no smoke. I checked my watch. Day 15, 12 days to payload. I started walking down the scorched center lane. The silence here was different. It wasn't the silence of holding breath. It was the silence of a graveyard. I walked for an hour. I reached the first tank, an M1 Abrams. Its torrent was blown off. I climbed up the treads to look inside. Maybe there was a radio. Maybe there was food. I looked down into the hatch. It wasn't a military radio. It was alien. Or at least, it didn't look like anything human. It was growing out of the tank's electronics. The infection wasn't just biological. It was technological. It was assimilating the machines. Crack. The sound came from the toll plaza ahead. A gunshot. A real, crisp, gunpowder gunshot. I froze on top of the tank. A survivor. A soldier. I waved back. I grabbed my flashlight and flashed it. The soldiers saw me. They waved frantically. Come, come now. Then they pointed down at the road between me and the tower. I looked down. The cleared road was a trap, a minefield of sleepers, and I was standing on a tank visible to the world. The soldier in the tower put the rifle to their shoulder and fired again, not at me, at the ground, 10 feet in front of me. Ping! The bullet sparked off the asphalt. The gray road hissed. The sleepers were waking up.
The ground wasn't waking up. It was hungry. The sleepers, that's what the soldier called them later, were flat, camouflage mimics. They lay dormant on the road, looking exactly like weathered asphalt, waiting for a vibration. And I was standing on a 40-ton bell that had just been rung. The soldier in the tower fired again. Crack! The bullet struck a sleeper right at the base of the tank. The creature convulsed, flipping over like a pancake, revealing a pale, ribbed underbelly. It screeched, a sound like high-pressure air escaping a hose. The soldier yelled something. I couldn't hear the words over the wind, but the gesture was clear. Run. I looked at the distance. The toll plaza was 200 yards away. 200 yards of living carpet. I couldn't step on them. If I stepped on them, those mouths would clamp onto my ankle and drag me down. I looked at the line of wreckage. The road wasn't totally clear. There was a burnt-out Humvee about 20 feet away, then a concrete median barrier, then a crater. I had to play hopscotch. I jumped. I leaped from the tank tread, aiming for the hood of the Humvee. I hit the metal hard. Clang! The impact sent a ripple through the sleepers below. They hissed in unison, their bodies arching up, snapping blindly at the air where I had just been. I didn't stop. Momentum was my only armor.
I scrambled over the roof of the Humvee. The soldier fired again, dropping a sleeper that was trying to slither up the door. Ping! Thwack! "Move!" the soldier roared. I heard him this time. I jumped for the concrete median. I landed badly. My ankle, the bad one, rolled. Pain shot up my leg, white hot and blinding. I stumbled, falling off the concrete. I hit the ground. It felt like landing on a waterbed filled with rotten meat. The sleeper underneath me bucked. It didn't bite me immediately. It was confused by the impact. I scrambled, clawing at the concrete barrier. The sleeper to my left lunged. Its mouth, a circle of inward curving needles, latched onto my backpack. It pulled. I was jerked backward. "No!" I screamed. I flailed with the tire iron. I smashed it down blindly. Crunch! I hit something soft. The grip loosened. Crack, crack, crack! The soldier was rapid-firing now. Bullets chewed up the road around me, disintegrating the sleepers that were closing in. He was clearing a path with 5.56mm rounds. I pulled myself up onto the median. I didn't look back at the backpack. It was ripped, supply spilling out, but I still had it attached by one strap. I ran along the top of the median barrier. It was narrow, only 6 inches wide, a balance beam over a pit of vipers. The toll plaza loomed ahead. The heavy steel gate was cracking open, just a foot. I reached the end of the median. There was a 30-foot gap of open ground before the gate. "Come on!" the soldier screamed. I sprinted. I stepped on them. I had to. I felt them squirm under my boots. I heard the crunch of their cartilage. One grabbed my heel. I kicked free, losing the duct tape armor on that leg. Another snapped at my hand. I dove for the gate.
I lay on the cold concrete floor, staring up at fluorescent lights. Real electric lights. They flickered, powered by a generator, but they were the most beautiful things I had ever seen.
Check him!
A voice growled. I rolled over. The soldier was standing over me. He wasn't young. He was in his 50s. Gray hair, buzz cut close to the scalp, face carved from granite and scar tissue. His name tag read Miller. He had the rifle pointed at my chest. "Bites?" he asked. "Scratches?" "No," I wheezed. "Ankle sprained. Just tired." Miller lowered the rifle, but he didn't safe it. He reached out a hand. I took it. He hauled me up with a strength that belied his age. "You're lucky, son," Miller said. His voice was like gravel in a mixer. "The sleepers are usually faster than that. The cold slows them down." I looked around. It was just him. No platoon, no squad, just one old man and a wall of monitors. "Where are the others?" I asked. Miller walked over to a coffee pot on a hot plate. He poured a cup of black sludge and handed it to me. "Gone," he said. "Retreated to the mainland week 1, or died trying." "Why are you here?" Miller took a sip from his own mug. He walked to the main window, a slit of reinforced glass looking out over the bridge. "Because someone has to keep the gate shut, and because someone has to wait for the package."
I sat on a crate of 50 caliber ammo. The coffee burned my tongue, waking up my nervous system. "The payload," I said. "I heard it on the radio, Channel 9. Miller turned, eyebrows raised. "You found the frequency? Smart. Most civvies just scream on the emergency bands until their batteries die." He walked over to a console. He tapped a few keys. A digital map appeared on the main screen. It showed the eastern seaboard, a red circle pulsing over our location. "It's not a rescue," I said. "No," Miller sighed. He looked tired, infinitely tired. "It's a containment protocol. Operation Clean Slate. Tactical nuclear strike. Low yield, high radiation. Designed to sterilize the biomatter. In 12 days, I said. Miller shook his head. "No, the radio loop is old. It recorded that message 3 days ago." My blood ran cold. "So, 9 days? Try 4.
maybe 5 if the wind holds. The payload delivery is automated. Once the saturation levels reach critical, boom. Wait, I said, standing up. It says awaiting lock. The radio said target confirmed. Miller grimaced. The satellite knows the grid square, but for a clean hit, to take out the bridge without cracking the tectonic plate below it, they need a ground beacon, a laser designator. He pointed to a black Pelican case in the corner of the room. It was locked. That's the beacon, Miller said. My orders were to set it up, verify the density of the infection, and signal the strike. Then evac by chopper. So why haven't you? Miller laughed, a dry, humorless bark. Look at the bridge, kid. The chopper never came. The mist ate the rotors on day 3. And the beacon, he kicked the case. It's broken. The transponder is fried. I can't signal the strike. So, no nuke? I felt a surge of hope. Wrong, Miller said. If they don't get the precise lock, the failsafe kicks in. They don't send the tactical nuke. They send the hammer. Carpet bombing. Thermobaric. They'll burn the bridge, the island, and half the coastline just to be sure. There's no way off the bridge, Elias. The mainland end is collapsed. The island end, that's where this shit started. It's ground zero. We are trapped in the kill box. I slumped back against the wall. 41 days of survival. For this? To be vaporized by my own government because an old man couldn't fix a radio? Unless, Miller said softly. I looked up. Unless we stop the signal, the broadcast tower, the one sending the automated target confirmed loop. It's not the satellite, it's local. Where? He pointed to the map, to a spot behind us, back the way I came. The midpoint maintenance station, under the bridge, in the catwalks. There's a repeater station there. It's stuck on a loop, telling the system we're ready for the hammer. If we kill that signal, the failsafe resets, buys us time, maybe months. Under the bridge? I repeated. You mean down there? I gestured to the floor, to the abyss below the roadway. Miller nodded. He pulled a shotgun from a rack on the wall and tossed it to me. You walked through the hive to get here. You've got grit. I can't walk so good anymore. He tapped his left leg. It was stiff. Prosthetic? No, bandaged heavily. We go down into the catwalks. We cut the hard line to the repeater. We stop the countdown. And then? I asked. Then? Miller smiled, racking the slide of his rifle.
We spent the night in the bunker. I ate a real MRE, chili mac. I slept on a cot. The next morning, day 16, we geared up. Miller gave me the shotgun, a Mossberg 500. He gave me a box of shells. He gave me a proper gas mask to replace my duct tape scarf. We didn't go out the front door. We went to a hatch in the back of the control room. The Undercroft, Miller said. Service tunnels. They run the entire length of the bridge, underneath the road deck. It's a maze, and it's dark. What's down there? I asked, checking the safety on the shotgun. Miller turned on his helmet light. The things that were too heavy to walk on the road, he said. He dropped down the ladder. I took one last look at the monitors, at the flashing red circle of death, then I followed him into the dark.
The world above, the cars, the fog, the gray light, felt like a memory. Down here, there was only rust and the abyss. The Undercroft was a labyrinth of maintenance catwalks suspended beneath the main deck of the bridge. It was a skeleton of steel beams, pipes, and grated walkways. Every step I took rang out. Clang, clang. Step on the bolts, he hissed, his voice muffled by his gas mask. The grate is rusted thin in the middle. Walk on the bolts where it's welded to the beam, unless you want to take the long dive. I looked down. Through the diamond mesh of the floor, I could see nothing but blackness, but I could hear the ocean. It was hundreds of feet down, a churning, angry presence. Every few seconds, a gust of sea spray would shoot up through the darkness, misting us with freezing salt water. It's quieter down here, I whispered. Don't let that fool you, Miller replied. The wind drowns out the breathing. We walked single file. Miller took point, his rifle mounted with a tactical light that cut a clean white tunnel through the gloom.
I walked backward every 10 steps, sweeping the rear with the shotgun. The atmosphere was heavy, damp. The smell of ozone was replaced by the smell of low tide and wet iron. We passed a maintenance junction box. It had been ripped open. The heavy copper cables inside were gone, gnawed through. "Rats?" I asked, pointing to the severed cables. Miller stopped. He shone his light on the bite marks. They were the size of a dinner plate. "Big rats," he muttered. "Keep moving."
We had been walking for 20 minutes when the walkway narrowed. To our left was a massive concrete pylon, one of the main supports of the bridge. To our right, the drop. Attached to the side of the pylon were shapes.
"Don't shine the light directly on them," Miller warned, shielding his beam with his hand. "Wall crawlers, they're dormant. They conserve energy by calcifying their outer skin." Are they alive?" "Mostly," Miller said. "They're basically stomach acids and teeth wrapped in a rock. If you wake them up, they don't chase you, they just explode. They spray corrosive bile. It'll melt that gas mask to your face in 3 seconds." I stepped carefully. My backpack scraped against the railing. "Skirt!" One of the barnacles on the wall twitched. The slit in the center opened an inch, revealing a pulsating red interior. A hiss of steam escaped. I froze. Miller grabbed my shoulder and pulled me forward, forcing me to walk faster, but stay silent. We passed a row of 50 of them, a minefield on the wall. I could feel the heat radiating from them, a feverish, biological warmth in the freezing cold tunnel.
The catwalk ended. We reached a section where the steel grating had simply fallen away. A 20-foot gap stood between us and the next section of the walkway. The only way across was a single I-beam, a structural support about 8 inches wide that spanned the gap. It was wet, it was slick with algae, and there was no handrail. "You go first," Miller said. "Me? You're the soldier." "I've got a bum leg," Miller said, tapping his knee. "If I slip, I need you on the other side to catch me, or at least to finish the mission." I looked at the beam. I looked at the drop. I slung the shotgun across my back. I got down on my hands and knees. "Don't crawl," Miller said. "Center of gravity is too low. You'll slip. Walk it. Keep your eyes on the other side. Do not look down." I stepped out under the beam. The wind hit me instantly, trying to push me off. My boots struggled for grip on the slime. 1 step, 2 steps. I was halfway across when the bridge groaned, a massive structural shifting sound. The beam vibrated under my feet. I wavered. My arms circled wildly. I looked down. "Eyes up," Miller barked. I snapped my head up. I focused on the rusty railing on the other side. I took 3 quick, terrified steps and threw myself onto the grating. I landed hard, clutching the metal mesh. "Clear!" I yelled, my voice cracking. Miller followed. He didn't hesitate. He walked the beam with a practiced, rhythmic gait, ignoring the wind, ignoring the leg. He hacked onto the platform next to me without breaking a sweat. "Good job. Now check your 6.
I turned around. We had reached a wider maintenance platform, the central hub where several walkways intersected. In the center of the platform was a nest. It was built from crushed cars that had fallen from the deck above, woven together with the gray resin and massive, thick cables. And sleeping in the nest was the heavy. "Jesus," I whispered. "Titan class," Miller murmured, clicking his safety off. "Armored, heavy hitter. It's guarding the repeater." I looked past the monster. Behind the nest, embedded in the wall of the pylon, was a gray metal box with blinking lights. A thick bundle of cables ran into it. The repeater. "How do we kill that?" I asked. "We don't," Miller said. "We can't. That shell is 3 inches of steel and bone. Small arms fire will just tickle it." "So we sneak?" "No," Miller said, reaching into his vest. He pulled out a block of C4 plastic explosive. I'm going to blow the supports on the walkway to the left. When that thing goes to investigate the noise, you run for the repeater. You cut the hard line. Then you run like hell toward the ladder on the far side. And you? I'll keep it busy. Miller, go! Boom! The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. A section of the walkway collapsed, falling into the ocean with a crash of twisting metal. The Titan woke up. It didn't stand up like a man. It unfolded, legs upon legs. It let out a roar that wasn't a scream. It was a foghorn sound, deep and bass-heavy. It turned toward the explosion. It began to charge, its heavy footsteps denting the steel floor. Thoom, thoom. Move, Elias, Miller screamed, opening fire with his rifle to draw its attention further.
I ran. I sprinted past the nest. The smell was horrific, rotting kelp and old meat. I reached the repeater box. It was locked. I didn't have a key. I reversed the shotgun. I used the stock as a hammer. Smash! Smash! The faceplate crumpled. I jammed the barrel into the hole and levered it open. Inside was a mess of circuitry and glowing wires. The Titan roared again. I heard Miller yelling, heard the ping, ping, ping of bullets bouncing off its shell. I reached in with my knife. I grabbed the thickest bundle of wires, the red and black ones pulsing with power. I sawed at them. The insulation was tough. Snap! The wires parted. Sparks showered my face. "It's done!" I yelled. "Miller, it's done!" I turned around. The Titan hadn't taken the bait. It had ignored Miller's bullets. It was standing right behind me. Miller scrambled for his sidearm. "Elias, get down!" The Titan swung. It wasn't a fast swing. It was a wrecking ball. I dropped flat. The claw passed inches over my head and smashed into the repeater box, obliterating it and shearing the concrete wall behind it. The impact shook the platform. The floor beneath me tilted. The bolts were shearing.
The section of the platform I was lying on broke free. I slid. I grabbed the edge of the grate. My legs dangled over the abyss. The Titan loomed over the edge, looking down at me. Its face was a cluster of eyes glowing with violet light. It raised its claw to finish me. Blam! A shotgun blast hit the Titan in its sensory cluster. Miller. He had crawled forward. He had picked up my shotgun, which I dropped. He racked the slide one-handed. Blam! The Titan recoiled, blinded for a second. It swiped blindly, hitting the support cable holding the rest of the platform. Ping! Snap! The cable whipped. The platform gave way completely. Miller looked at me. He was sliding too. He looked at the Titan. He looked at the C4 detonator still in his hand. He must have had a second charge. "Go!" Miller yelled. He didn't jump for safety. He launched himself at the Titan. He tackled the creature's leg, jamming the second brick of C4 into the joint of its armor. "Fire in the hole!" I fell. I fell for what felt like forever. I hit water. The cold was instantaneous. It wasn't just temperature. It was a physical assault. It punched the air out of my lungs. I didn't know which way was up. The explosion had shattered my equilibrium. I was tumbling in a void of freezing salt water and darkness. My backpack, it was dragging me down. The weight of the tire iron, the water bottles, the ammo. I clawed at the straps. My fingers were numb, useless clubs. Panic. The biological imperative to breathe screamed in my brain. Inhale. Just inhale. No. I thrashed. I kicked. My boot hit something solid, a piece of the fallen walkway. I pushed off. I saw a faint lightness above me. The surface. I pulled the release buckle on the backpack. It slid away into the dark, taking my shotgun, my supplies, and my map with it. I kicked upward. My lungs were burning, spasming. Gray spots danced in my vision. I broke the surface. I gasped, a ragged, wet, desperate intake of air.
mixed with sea spray. I coughed, retching up salt water. I was alive, but I was tiny. From down here, the bridge looked like a scar in the sky. The waves were 10 feet high, rolling swells that lifted me up and slammed me down. I treaded water. My limbs felt heavy, leaden. Hypothermia was minutes away. I needed high ground. I scanned the water. The ocean was a graveyard of debris. Cars that had fallen over the months bobbed in the swell, held afloat by trapped air bubbles before slowly sinking. Tires, pallets, bodies. "Help!" I croaked. The sound was swallowed by the wind. A shape drifted past me, a section of the yellow school bus roof, charred but buoyant. I swam for it. My stroke was weak. The current fought me. I grabbed the edge of the metal. It dipped, threatening to flip, but I hooked my arm over it. I hauled my torso out of the water. I lay there, shivering violently. My teeth chattered so hard I thought they would crack. I looked up at the pylon, the massive concrete foot of the bridge. It was like a cliff face, rising 200 feet out of the water before meeting the steel of the deck. But at the base of the pylon, there was a ledge. A concrete footer, maybe 20 feet wide, surrounding the pillar just above the waterline. A service platform. It was my only chance. I kicked, using the bus roof as a raft. I paddled toward the concrete island.
It took me an hour to cover 300 yards. By the time I reached the pylon, I couldn't feel my hands or feet. The swells crashed against the concrete footer. I waited for a wave to lift me. Now, I let go of the raft. The wave picked me up and slammed me onto the concrete. I scrambled, clawing at the barnacles, real ones this time, and slime, dragging myself out of the reach of the surf. I rolled onto my back. I stared up at the underside of the bridge. It was a ceiling of rust and gloom. I was safe from the water. I was safe from the Titan. I was safe from the sleepers on the deck. But I was trapped on a concrete slab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with no food, no water, and wet clothes. "Miller," I whispered. No answer, just the crash of the waves. I crawled to the center of the platform. There was a service door set into the concrete pylon, a heavy steel blast door. I tried the handle, locked, rusted shut. I slumped against it. This was it. This was where I died. Not by a monster, but by exposure. Then I saw the pipe. It was a runoff pipe from the roadway above, rainwater or condensation. I cupped my hands under it. I drank. It tasted like oil and rust, but it was fresh water. I drank until my stomach hurt. I looked around for shelter. There was a recess in the concrete, a small alcove shielded from the wind. I crawled inside. I stripped off my wet clothes, wringed them out, and put them back on. The damp wool was better than nothing. I huddled in the corner. I watched the sun go down. The violet bioluminescence of the bridge above began to glow, casting eerie shadows on the water. I was the troll under the bridge now.
Days passed. I think. Time became fluid again. I slept. I drank from the pipe. I shivered. I found food on the third day. A crate washed up on my little island. It wasn't supplies. It was garbage. But inside a plastic bag, sealed tight, was a half-eaten bag of potato chips. I ate them slowly, one chip an hour. I watched the ocean. I saw the leviathans breach, massive serpentine shapes that ignored me. I saw bodies fall from the bridge above, victims of the infected or the starvation. I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned out. The panic was gone. I was part of the ecosystem now. I was a barnacle clinging to the rock.
On the 7th day, I saw a light. Not the red light of the ambulance, not the violet light of the mist. A searchlight. It was sweeping the water miles away to the east. A ship, a massive gray hull cutting through the fog. It wasn't a rescue ship. It was a destroyer, a military vessel. It was patrolling the perimeter of the containment zone. I stood up, I waved my arms, I screamed. The ship didn't turn, it was too far away. It was enforcing the blockade, making sure nothing left the bridge. I watched it disappear into the mist. I sat back down. I realized then that Miller was right. There was no rescue. The world hadn't ended. It had just cut us off. We were a gangrenous limb, and they had tied a tourniquet. But I was still here. I looked at the service door again, the rusted one. I spent 3 days working on it with a piece of rebar I found. I chipped away the rust. I leveraged the hinges. Creak. It opened. It wasn't a room. It was a stairwell, a spiral staircase going up, back up to the undercroft, back up to the bridge. I stood there for a long time. I could stay here on the island. I had water. I could scavenge debris for food. I could survive here, hidden, safe, until I died of old age or sickness. Or I could go back up, back to the monsters, back to the struggle, back to the possibility of finding a radio that worked. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the woman in the SUV. I thought about Miller blowing himself up to buy us time. 30 days. The countdown had reset to 30 days. I had 23 days left. I picked up my piece of rebar. I took a drink from the rusty pipe, and I stepped into the stairwell.
I climbed for hours, or maybe days. The stairwell was a purgatory of rust and verticality. My legs burned, then went numb, and then moved on autopilot. I counted the steps. 4,802. I thought about the man I was 40-some days ago. A guy listening to a podcast about Roman aqueducts, worried about being late for a meeting. That man died in the traffic jam. That man died in the Civic. The man climbing the stairs was something else. I was forged in the dark. I was tempered in the ocean. I reached the top, a hatch. I spun the wheel and groaned, the sound of a tomb opening. I pushed it up. I stood on the top of the world. I was on top of the North Tower. Below me, the cables swept down like harp strings into the fog. I could see the cars, thousands of tiny rusted metal specks. I could see the wall where the infected had built their hive. I could see the scorch mark where the bus had burned. I breathed in deeply. The air was thin, cold, and clean. I wasn't trapped anymore. I was the king of the castle.
I descended the maintenance ladder to the main deck. I moved differently now. I didn't scurry. I didn't crawl. I walked. I reached the toll plaza where Miller had lived. The blast door was still open. Inside, it was a tomb. Miller's coffee cup was still on the table, mold growing inside it. The monitors were dark. The generator had finally run out of fuel. I found his stash, a backup crate he hadn't mentioned, more ammo, a combat knife, a wind-up radio, and a logbook. I took the knife. I took the radio. I walked back out onto the bridge.
I learned to live with them. The sleepers on the ground, you just have to walk with a soft cadence. The architects in the wall, they don't care about you unless you touch their work. The titans, they stay in the undercroft. I scavenged. I went back to the trucks I had skipped. I found canned peaches. I found blankets. I found a solar charger. I set up camp in the toll tower. It's my lighthouse now.
Every day I wind the radio. I scan the frequencies. Channel 9 is silent. Miller and I killed the targeting beacon. The payload never came. The 30-day timer must have paused, or the system lost track of us. But sometimes, on the AM band, through the heavy static of the mist, I hear things. Voices. Not the mimics, real voices. Snippets of broadcasts from the mainland, or maybe from ships at sea. The quarantine zone remains in effect. Survivors are advised to Florida is gone. The world is still out there. Broken, maybe. Dying, maybe. But there. And I am here. I am the keeper of the causeway. I watch the bridge. I map the changes in the infection. I write it all down in Miller's logbook. Day 62. The architects are expanding the wall south. Day 68. A new titan emerged from the water. It fought a leviathan. The ocean turned black. Day 75. I saw a bird, a real living seagull. It landed on the railing. It flew away unharmed. Hope is a dangerous thing, but it's the only thing that keeps the cold out. Sometimes I look at the silver SUV, the one with the family. The mother is gone, dragged away weeks ago, but the car remains. It's a monument. They're all monuments. Every car out there is a gravestone for a life that was interrupted on a Tuesday morning. I promised Miller I would survive. I promised Sarah I wouldn't let the silence win. So I stay. I wait. I have a flare gun with one shell left. I have a radio. I have a knife. If the mist lifts, I'll be here. If the military returns, I'll be here. If the world ends completely, I'll be the last man standing on the bridge between the living and the dead. My name is Elias. The odometer reads 84,302 miles. And I am still moving.